Seth Bullock. The name echoes through the history of the American West, painting a picture of a fearless lawman standing tall in the rough-and-tumble streets of Deadwood. We see him in books and on TV, the hero who brought law to a lawless town. But what if I told you the story we all know isn't the whole story? What if the real Seth Bullock was far more complex, more ambitious, and yes, more shocking than the legend lets on? Today, we're peeling back the layers of time and myth. We're going to uncover the surprising truths about the man behind the badge, a journey that takes us from a difficult childhood in Canada, through the dusty streets of Montana, right into the heart of Deadwood's chaos, and even into the halls of power alongside a U.S. president. This is the story of Seth Bullock you haven't heard. If you enjoy uncovering the real stories behind Old West legends, do us a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the past. Now let's get started. Part 1. Forging a Lawman. Seth Bullock wasn't born in the Wild West. He came into the world on July 23, 1849, in Amherstburg, Canada. His father, George Bullock, was a retired British Army sergeant major and a local politician. But home life wasn't easy. George was known as a strict disciplinarian, and young Seth often felt the sting of his father's hand for small mistakes. This harsh upbringing didn't make Seth obedient. It made him restless. His childhood was unhappy, and he tried to run away when he was just 13. At 16, he tried again, heading to Montana to stay with his sister, but he was sent back. By 18, he'd had enough and left home for good. But there's a deeper, more shocking twist to this family story. Around 1860, Seth's father, George, had to resign as county treasurer because money went missing. To avoid being charged, he fled across the border to Detroit. This happened around the time Seth's mother died, leaving the children mostly on their own as their father's properties were seized to cover his debts. Think about that. The father of the future famous lawman was a fugitive, accused of corruption. Could this family shame have fueled Seth's own drive for law, order, and respect? Or did his father's political life plant a seed of ambition? By 1867, Seth was back in Helena, Montana. He aimed high, running for the territorial legislature, though he didn't win. He didn't give up, though, and later won a seat in the territorial Senate, serving from 1871 to 1872. It's said he helped create Yellowstone National Park during this time, but some historians believe his role has been greatly exaggerated. Still, it shows a young man driven to lead and build a legacy. In 1873, Bullock pinned on his first important badge, Sheriff of Lewis and Clark County, Montana. It was here that a key part of his legend was born, the story of Clell Watson, a horse thief. The popular tale is thrilling. Bullock gets in a gunfight with Watson, gets slightly wounded, and arrests him. Then, when a mob tries to stop the hanging and scares off the executioner, Bullock steps up, pulls the lever himself, and holds off the angry crowd with a shotgun. It's a scene right out of a movie, and it even made it into the HBO show Deadwood. But is it true? Historians and old newspaper accounts tell a different story. They say the execution went off without a hitch, with no mention of a mob or Bullock playing hangman. In fact, it's said that Bullock actually found the two executions he oversaw as sheriff so distasteful that it was one reason he didn't run for re-election. So, did Bullock bravely face down a lynch mob, or was it a more routine, though grim, part of his job? It seems Bullock himself told the more exciting version later in life, showing how legends, even self-made ones, can grow. This difference between the myth and the likely reality is one of the first shocking truths about Seth Bullock. Part 2. Deadwood Calling. Deadwood. Just the name sounds like the Wild West. It was a place of gold, mud, and raw ambition. And in 1876, Seth Bullock and his partner Saul Starr headed right into it, not looking for trouble but for business. Montana was facing hard times, and Deadwood was a booming gold camp that needed supplies. Bullock and Starr, who had become good friends and partners in Helena, saw an opportunity. They arrived with wagons full of hardware, picks, shovels, dynamite, pots, pans, everything a miner could need. They got there on August 1st, 1876, and the very next day, August 2nd, Wild Bill Hickok was shot and killed. This shocking event highlighted just how badly Deadwood needed law and order, and it likely pushed Bullock toward wearing a badge again. Bullock and Starr quickly set up their business, first in a tent, then in a building, the office of Starr and Bullock, auctioneers and commission merchants. Saul Starr, a respected figure who would later serve many terms as Deadwood's mayor, handled the store. Bullock, the experienced auctioneer, was the outside man dealing with the public. This shows that Bullock's first role in Deadwood was as a businessman, not a lawman. His partnership with Starr was key, and their combined skills helped them become influential figures in shaping the town. Part 3. The Sheriff's Badge and Defeat. With Wild Bill gone and lawlessness a real problem, Deadwood needed a sheriff. But Bullock wasn't Deadwood's first marshal, as many believe. When Lawrence County was officially formed in March 1877, the governor appointed Bullock as the interim sheriff. He served in this role for about 9 months. It was a temporary job meant to keep the peace until elections could be held. And here's another shocking truth. When the elections were held in November 1877, Seth Bullock lost. The man we think of as Deadwood's ultimate lawman was defeated by John J. Manning. And he lost to Manning again in 1878. Being turned down twice by the voters makes you wonder how the people of the Black Hills really felt about him back then. But during those 9 months as appointed sheriff, Bullock took his job seriously. He hired tough deputies and brought a sense of order to the wild camp. And here's something remarkable. Accounts say he did it all without killing anyone. His steely personality and his famous intimidating stare, said to be able to stare down an angry cobra, were his main weapons. He focused on presence and control, not violence. He showed his nerve early on. When the famous lawman Wyatt Earp came to town, possibly wanting the sheriff job himself, Bullock met with him. Bullock reportedly convinced Earp his services weren't needed, and Earp left town. It shows Bullock knew how to handle tough characters. So why did he lose the elections? It likely wasn't just one thing. Party politics played a role. Powerful people involved in Deadwood's less-than-legal businesses, like Al Swearingen, might have seen Bullock as a threat and worked against him. And Bullock's own actions, which we'll get to, certainly didn't help with some voters. The truth is, being tough wasn't enough to win an election in Deadwood. Part 4. Taming Deadwood, the real story and the controversies. Did Seth Bullock single-handedly tame Deadwood? It's a great story, but it's not quite true. Deadwood was wild, no doubt about it, but turning it from a chaotic camp into a town was a slow process involving many people. And here's a detail that might surprise you. Bullock wasn't even in Deadwood during some key months in late 1876 and early 1877. He left for about 5 months to bring his wife, Martha, and daughter to Deadwood, but also to meet with the governor. This shows he was a smart political operator, securing his official appointment before he even started the job. We also can't forget John J. Manning, the man who beat Bullock in the elections. Manning served as the first elected sheriff and played a big part in enforcing the law. He arrested criminals and even faced down a lynch mob himself, just like the legends say Bullock did. History often focuses on Bullock, but Manning deserves credit too. And remember, even when he was a lawman, Bullock was still heavily involved in his businesses. Now, what about Bullock's reputation as the toughest lawman? There's a claim that he killed more than 25 lawbreakers during his career. This came from an Indiana newspaper shortly after his death. If true, it's an incredible number. But is it fact or frontier legend? Most sources agree that during his time as Deadwood's appointed sheriff, he killed no one. The only confirmed killing was Clell Watson, and that was back in Montana. The newspaper that reported the 25 men claim was far from Dakota and likely relied on exaggerated second-hand stories. It seems the high body count is likely a myth, fueled by his tough image and the way Old West stories often grew bigger with each telling. Maybe his toughness was so effective that he didn't need to use his gun often. His presence alone might have been enough. Then there's Al Swearingen, owner of the notorious Gem Theater, a center for vice. Bullock and Swearingen were bound to clash. Swearingen was powerful and influential, and some think he may have worked against Bullock in the elections. But a popular Deadwood legend suggests a different relationship, a sort of uneasy truce. The story goes that they split Main Street, with Swearingen controlling the Badlands area and Bullock largely staying out of it. If true, it means Bullock might have tolerated some vice to keep a general peace, a very pragmatic and perhaps shocking compromise. But honestly, solid proof of their direct interactions is scarce. Much of what we see in shows like Deadwood is fictional. But one event is well documented and highly controversial: the Keats mine strike in 1877. Miners who hadn't been paid took over the mine. Bullock was sent to handle it. When he couldn't negotiate or make arrests and realized many locals sided with the miners, he took drastic steps. He called for federal troops. President Hayes sent soldiers. Even then, the miners held out. So, Bullock resorted to an extreme tactic. He sealed the mine shaft and burned sulfur, trying to smoke them out. Eventually, the miners surrendered. Mine owners praised him, but many workers saw him as an enemy. This incident likely cost him the sheriff election that year and earned him the label enemy of the working man. It shows a side of Bullock that isn't about fighting outlaws, but about protecting business interests, even if it meant using harsh measures against fellow citizens. Part 5. The Builder and Businessman. Seth Bullock was much more than just a lawman. He was a sharp businessman, a town builder, and a man with big dreams. His partnership with Saul Starr was at the heart of many of these ventures. Starr was a respected leader in his own right, serving as Deadwood's mayor for 10 terms. Together they were a powerful force. Their hardware store was their first success. But when it burned down in a huge fire in 1894, they didn't just rebuild. They built Deadwood's first luxury hotel on the spot, the Bullock Hotel. It opened in 1896 with 3 stories, over 60 rooms, steam heat, and even indoor plumbing on every floor. Incredibly modern for its time. And you can still visit it today. They also got into ranching and farming. Bullock even pioneered growing alfalfa in Dakota in 1881. But perhaps their biggest achievement was found in the town of Belle Fourche. They saw the railroad coming and knew its importance. They cleverly persuaded the railroad to build through their land by offering a free right-of-way and land for a town. They even offered free lots to anyone who would move buildings from a nearby town. Belle Fourche boomed, becoming a major livestock shipping center. This shows Bullock wasn't just reacting to the frontier, he was actively shaping its future. He was a true frontier capitalist, always looking for opportunities to build and grow. Part 6. Friend of our President. One of the most remarkable parts of Bullock's life was his close friendship with Theodore Roosevelt. It started in 1884. Bullock, then a deputy U.S. Marshal, was bringing in a horse thief called Crazy Steve. Roosevelt, a young rancher and deputy sheriff himself, was in the area, possibly after the same man. They met by a chuck wagon. Roosevelt later joked that Bullock and his men looked so rough he thought they might be gamblers he'd have to watch out for. But they hit it off, and a lifelong friendship began. Roosevelt would call Bullock a true Westerner, the finest type of frontiersman. When the Spanish-American War broke out, Bullock helped recruit Grigsby's Cowboys, a volunteer cavalry unit, though they didn't see action like Roosevelt's Rough Riders. But the friendship paid off. When Roosevelt became president, he appointed Bullock as U.S. Marshal for South Dakota in 1905, a job he held for 9 years. This connection took Bullock from a regional figure to a nationally known one. Bullock's admiration was clear. In 1905, he led about 50 cowboys, including a young Tom Mix, who would become a silent film star, to ride in Roosevelt's inaugural parade. Roosevelt also made Bullock a forest supervisor for the Black Hills. Bullock took this job seriously, stopping illegal logging, managing timber, and even organizing a huge volunteer fire department. He helped establish Wind Cave National Park and Devil's Tower National Monument. He was a conservationist influenced by his friend, the conservationist president. When Roosevelt died in 1919, Bullock was deeply affected. He immediately worked to create a memorial. This became the Friendship Tower on a peak near Deadwood, renamed Mount Roosevelt. It was the first memorial to Theodore Roosevelt in the country, dedicated on July 4, 1919. Sadly, Seth Bullock himself would pass away just a few months later. Part 7. Separating Man from Myth. So who was the real Seth Bullock? He was certainly imposing. Roosevelt described his strongly marked aquiline face and hawk eyes. Locals said his stare could outstare a mad cobra. He projected an image of strength and resolve. But was he always angry, with a fiery temper, as often shown in fiction? Historical accounts say otherwise. He was described as determined, courteous, and aloof, and that there was no hint of latent anger in his personality. His toughness seems to have been more about a controlled, calculated intimidation than hot-headed rage. This controlled approach might be even more shocking than the myth. And what about shows like HBO's Deadwood? While fantastic entertainment, they take a lot of liberties. Let's clear up a few things. He wasn't the long-term elected sheriff of Deadwood. He was the appointed interim sheriff of Lawrence County for about 9 months and lost 2 elections. He didn't tame Deadwood alone. It was a group effort, and he wasn't even there for some key early months. He didn't kill 25 men. The only confirmed one was in Montana, and he killed no one during his time as Deadwood's sheriff. He wasn't constantly angry. He was more aloof and controlled. He almost certainly never met Wild Bill Hickok, or if he did, it was just for a day or so. His wife, Martha, wasn't his brother's widow. She was his childhood sweetheart, and they were married with a daughter before he came to Deadwood. The dramatic Clell Watson hanging story? Likely an exaggeration. Newspapers at the time reported it went smoothly with no mob. Understanding these differences helps us see the real man. Seth Bullock died of colon cancer on September 23, 1919, in his Deadwood home. He was buried in Mount Moriah Cemetery near Wild Bill and Calamity Jane. His grave faces Mount Roosevelt, his tribute to his friend. His tombstone simply says, "Pioneer," a fitting word for a man who was a lawman, a businessman, a town builder, a politician, and a friend to a president. The shocking truth about Seth Bullock isn't that he was a hidden villain. It's that he was so much more than the simple legend. He was a man of contradictions, a smart operator who built his own image. He was a lawman when needed, but a businessman first and foremost. He wasn't a lone hero, but a key player in a complex time. He was a pragmatist, sometimes a ruthless one, but also a visionary who built businesses, towns, and lasting friendships. He was a real man, flawed and fascinating, who left a deep mark on the American West. So, what do you think is the most surprising truth about Seth Bullock? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look behind the legend, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more true stories from the Old West. Thanks for watching.